So a couple of my friends that coach college ball, they're assistants, really smart baseball guys as well. And one of the things that we always kind of like differ a little bit in, how we're describing this stuff. Um, I almost never teach someone, especially like early on when they get older and they're like have a lot better like back control. I'm more liable to like want to teach them, to be able to, hit like a ground ball on command or like, do something like that. Usually the way that I'll do it though is I'll have someone like I'll flip or throw and I'll try to make people hit target launch angles. So like the first ball you'll be trying to hit like a 0 degree launch angle, which is really never advisable. It's just a back control drill, right? So a 0 degree launch angle, then a 10 degree launch angle, then a 20, a 30, and a 40, just so they're all kind of like able to like understand like how to control where you hit the ball without really changing your swing pattern that much. Because a lot of times what ends up happening is people just kind of change their swing pattern based on the goal that you're trying to accomplish. Like, oh, it's a 0 degree, like let me swing way down. It's like, well, no, you can kind of accomplish that by just hitting a different spot on the ball. Anyways, long story short, the thing that we differ on a lot is, situational hitting and like what we should be trying to do. So I want to try to like address that for a moment. So, obviously you guys watched the World Series, and in that last game there was some situations where there was just like a ground ball that was hit to the right side. I forget actually who did it. It doesn't really matter, but there was a ground ball hit to the right side and scored the runner from third, which has been, a thing like as long as baseball has existed. Like if the infield's playing back or at least like moderately back and you hit a ground ball to the right side of the infield, you're probably going to score that runner. So that's fine. Like that's an excellent way to approach like getting one run. Where I'm against doing that is when you have less than 2 strikes on you. So I totally understand that striking out in like a bases loaded situation or just a guy on third base situation is obviously a non-productive out. You obviously want to be able to try to produce that run that's at third base, but the how you do that is really important. If your main goal with no outs, and there's a runner on third base, or there's runners on second and third, or even first and third, whatever, bases loaded, is to hit a ground ball, then you're limiting the overall productivity of what that inning could be. So if your thoughts are, I'm going to drive a ball into the outfield when you have less than 2 outs, right, and less than 2 strikes, if your goal is I'm going to drive the ball into the outfield and you don't hit it right to an outfielder, then you don't give up an out to score that run. But if you do hit it to an outfielder and it's in the outfield, most likely you're going to score that run from third. So it's important to understand that situations are really important, but if you were to just, flip a ball into the outfield, then you have basically the same outcome with potential of having an even better outcome rather than just giving up an out. So I'm not against ground balls to the right side of the infield, but I think it's a last resort. And we shouldn't be aiming to hit those as your whole goal of your at bat. If you have to with 2 strikes to slow your bat down and just kind of like slap it somewhere in the infield, then I totally get it. And I'm not against that. But before you have 2 strikes in those situations, you don't really want to change your approach a ton, because one, that's going to maybe change the way that your body moves, which can affect, how well you hit the ball. And two, you're really just limiting the overall productivity of the inning. So that's something to think about, like, as you're moving forward, when it comes to, like, approach versus mechanics. I've talked about this a lot. I have an article about this as well. But I've talked about this a lot, like, overall. But it's important that, you don't worry as much about the situation until you need to worry about the situation. Obviously, it's not smart to strike out in those situations, but it's also not smart to have the only thing that you're trying to accomplish hit a dribbler to the right side of the infield. What I would say is that you don't want to just take 2 strikes and then all of a sudden get yourself in a hole where that's like what you have to do. You want to be really aggressive in those early counts before you get yourself in that 0-2 hole So that way you can take 2 aggressive cuts. And then if you need to, if you've missed those cuts or you fouled them off or whatever, if you need to, you can slow it down and just kind of put it in play. So it shouldn't be the main thing that you're trying to accomplish until you have to accomplish it with 2 strikes, given the situation that your team's in. Now, if you're in the first inning, is that something we want to do? I don't know. I think that's kind of like coach and team dependent. But as a hitter, you want to be aggressive until you have 2 strikes in those situations. But that doesn't mean you want to watch the 2 fastballs that you get, because you could miss-hit. You could miss-hit a ball, and it could end up being a ground ball to the right-hand side. You could miss-hit a ball, and it could end up being a fly ball to the outfield that scores that run. Or you could crush that ball, and it ends up being a home run, or just like, a single or like a double in the gap. So keep that in mind. We talk about like the necessity of putting the ball in play, and in those situations you want to for sure, but you don't want to like put yourself in that spot where that's the only option that you have as a hitter. It's way better to be really aggressive in those early counts. Hopefully you can hit a ball really hard, and then you don't have to give up that out and score that run. So you can kind of, have your cake and eat it too. So those are my thoughts for the day. And that's not to say that situational hitting is not important and can't help with the team concept. That said, from my perspective, the only type of situational hitting that I really want to like focus on is that situation where you have a runner on third and you're trying to score him. If you have a runner on second base, moving them over to third base is not really that valuable, because if you just hit a single, you'd score him anyway, assuming that your runner is not really slow. So, it's important to kind of understand like, what's a smart situational play statistically and what's not a smart situational play statistically. If you have any questions, all my contact info is below, so take a look.